The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly before Salvage Station Epsilon 7, where Lead Hannah stood motionless at her favorite spot on the observation deck. Her dark eyes remained fixed on an unusual sight that had caught her attention. A massive derelict vessel that had mysteriously drifted into their sector during the night shift. The ship's hull captured and reflected starlight in ways she had never seen before, creating an otherworldly iridescent display despite the thick layer of space dust coating its surface. 20 years of experience as a mechanic had brought all manner of abandoned vessels before her eyes, from ancient cargo haulers to decommissioned military craft. But this ship was different. Its very presence seemed to defy the natural order of things, as if it had emerged from another dimension entirely. Still studying our unexpected visitor, Kim De's voice broke through her thoughts as he approached with a data tablet in hand. The young assistant's usual cheerful demeanor was tinged with obvious concern. "There's something about this one. Duh. I can feel it," Hannah replied, not taking her eyes off the mysterious vessel. "Well, the initial scans are complete," he reported, pulling up a holographic display between them. "No life signs detected, which is good news. But the energy readings," he paused, frowning at the data streams. "They're unlike anything in our database. Some of these patterns don't even make sense according to our current understanding of physics." Hannah nodded slowly, studying the flowing streams of information. The ship's design was a puzzle that seemed to actively resist solving. Its curves and angles followed mathematical patterns that gave her a headache just trying to comprehend. Where human ships favored practical, functional designs, this vessel seemed to be built according to some alien aesthetic that bordered on artistic. "Look at these structural readings," she said, gesturing to one particular data set. "The hull composition appears to shift depending on the angle of our scans. It's as if the material itself is in constant flux, yet maintaining perfect structural integrity." "That's exactly why the advisory board is concerned," Day replied, scrolling through more reports on his tablet. "They've already issued preliminary orders to market for disposal. The official statement calls it too risky to salvage and a potential hazard to station safety." A familiar spark lit up in Hannah's eyes, the same spark that had earned her both commendations and reprimands throughout her career. She had built her reputation on taking the unsalvageable and turning it into something valuable. Each success had come from ignoring those who said something couldn't or shouldn't be done. "Since when have we ever listened to them about what's too risky?" she asked, a slight smile playing across her face. "Remember that Centaurian freighter they wanted to scrap? Now it's the backbone of the station's power grid." "This is different, Hannah," Dad protested. "We'd at least seen Centaurian technology before. This ship, it's completely unknown. We have no idea what systems it might have, what traps might be waiting." "Exactly," Hannah cut in, her voice filled with excitement rather than fear. "Think about it, duh. First contact with a completely new form of space travel, technology that could revolutionize everything we know about engineering. This isn't just another salvage job. This could be the discovery of the century." She turned away from the window and headed toward her office with determined strides. "Start assembling a preliminary survey team. The best engineers we have, people who can think outside the box, and get me every scrap of data we have on the ship's energy signatures. If we're going to convince the board to let us study it, we need to show them something they can't ignore." "And if they still say no?" Di asked, hurrying to keep up with her pace. Hannah stopped at her office door and turned to face him with a mischievous glint in her eye. "Then we'll just have to remind them that out here on the frontier, their orders sometimes take a very long time to reach us, especially when there's unexpected interference with the communications array." As she began pulling up detailed scan results on her office displays, Hannah couldn't shake the feeling that this mysterious ship had appeared in their sector for a reason. Something about it called to her engineering instincts, promising secrets and possibilities that could change humanity's understanding of space travel forever. Little did she know that this moment would mark the beginning of an adventure that would reshape not just her life, but the future of human space exploration itself. The derelict vessel floating silently beyond the station's windows held mysteries far beyond anything she could imagine. Mysteries that would soon challenge everything she thought she knew about the universe and humanity's place in it. Time passed slowly in the depths of space, but for Lihanna and her dedicated team, the last 3 months had vanished in a blur of discovery and wonder. The mysterious vessel they had fought so hard to study continued to challenge everything they thought they knew about spacecraft engineering. Each day brought new surprises as they carefully explored its otherworldly interior. The ship's internal layout defied conventional understanding. Corridors seemed to subtly shift when no one was looking directly at them. Rooms appeared larger on the inside than their external dimensions should allow. Every attempt to create a standard map of the vessel ended in confusion as spaces refused to maintain consistent relationships with each other. "I've checked these readings 3 times now," Park Jin announced one morning, his voice filled with a mixture of frustration and awe. He stood before a partially activated terminal, its soft blue glow casting strange shadows across his face. "The neural interface we found isn't just advanced. It's fundamentally different from anything in human technology." Hannah moved closer to examine the readings. She had handpicked Jin for the project specifically because of his expertise in bioelectronic systems. If something had him this excited, it was worth paying attention to. "See these response patterns," Jin continued, pointing to flowing streams of data. "It's not just designed for beings with different physical forms. It's built to interface with a completely different way of thinking. The whole system is set up to process information in ways our brains simply aren't wired for." Hannah nodded slowly, her mind already racing with possibilities. "Could we adapt it? Find a way to translate between their thought patterns and ours?" "Maybe," Jin replied, rubbing his tired eyes. "But it would be like teaching a colorblind person to understand rainbow patterns. We'd need to find ways to map their concepts onto things we can comprehend." Day after day, Hannah spent countless hours in the ship's massive engine room, methodically mapping its systems. The power core pulsed with an energy that seemed to ignore the basic laws of physics. Traditional scanning equipment often gave contradictory readings, as if the technology itself existed in multiple states simultaneously. "It's like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces keep changing shape," she explained to her team during one of their daily briefings. "But there are patterns here. We just have to learn how to see them." Slowly, painfully, those patterns began to emerge. The ship's systems didn't follow the rigid, predictable rules of human engineering. Instead, they displayed an almost organic flexibility, adapting and shifting in response to various stimuli. When they finally managed to power up a small section of the auxiliary systems, the response was unlike anything they had seen before. "Look at this," Kim Dae called out one evening, pointing to a diagnostic display. "The power distribution isn't fixed, it's learning. Every time we run a test, it adjusts itself to be more efficient." This discovery marked a turning point in their understanding. The vessel wasn't just advanced technology, it was adaptable technology. Its systems could change and evolve in response to new situations, new users, and new requirements. The implications were staggering. Human spacecraft were built to rigid specifications, their systems carefully designed to perform specific functions in specific ways. But this ship seemed capable of reinventing itself as needed. It was less like a machine and more like a living organism, growing and changing in response to its environment. As Hannah stood in the engine room late one night, watching the gentle pulse of the power core, she felt a growing sense of excitement. They weren't just studying an alien vessel, they were learning an entirely new approach to technology itself. If they could understand these principles, it could revolutionize human engineering. "We need to adjust our whole approach," she announced to her team the next morning. "Stop trying to force this ship to fit our understanding of how technology should work. Instead, we need to learn how to think the way its creators thought." The team's enthusiasm was infectious. Even those who had initially been skeptical were now fully invested in unlocking the ship's secrets. They began developing new testing protocols, creating innovative ways to measure and understand the vessel's unique properties. Their progress was slow but steady. Each small breakthrough led to new questions, new mysteries to unravel. But Hannah could sense they were on the verge of something tremendous. The ship wasn't just a piece of advanced technology. It was a doorway to possibilities they had never imagined possible. As she made her final notes for the day, Hannah couldn't help but smile. The advisory board had wanted to destroy this vessel, to eliminate the unknown rather than understand it. Instead, they were about to embark on one of the greatest technological adventures in human history. The Beast, as her team had taken to calling the ship, was slowly revealing its secrets, and those secrets would change everything. Early morning light filtered through the station's viewing ports as Hannah gathered her chosen team in what had become their primary work area. The room, once a standard station briefing chamber, now buzzed with energy as holographic displays showed countless readings from their mysterious vessel. After 6 months of study, Hannah had finally decided it was time to move forward. "We're calling it Project Phoenix," she announced, looking at each of her 4 carefully selected engineers in turn. Park Jin, the neural interface expert, sat with his ever-present data tablet. Kim Da, whose insight had proven invaluable in their initial discovery, leaned forward with interest. Song Min, the power systems specialist, had already started taking notes. Yoon Ha, their resident computer systems expert, watched with quiet intensity. "Phoenix?" Song Min asked, looking up from her notes. "Like the mythical bird?" "Exactly," Hannah replied, bringing up a new set of holographic displays. "Because we're not just studying this ship anymore. We're going to bring it back to life. But not as it was before. As something new." The displays filled with their collected data from months of research. Hundreds of tests, thousands of scans, and countless hours of observation had given them a basic understanding of the ship's systems. But true comprehension of how everything worked still eluded them. "I know what you're all thinking," Hannah continued, pacing slowly around the room. "We still don't understand half of what makes this ship work. The power core defies our physics. The neural interfaces operate on principles we can barely grasp. The spatial mechanics make our best mathematicians cry." She paused, allowing a small smile to cross her face. "But last night, I realized we've been approaching this all wrong. We don't need to understand everything about how it works. We just need to teach it to understand us." The room fell silent as her words sank in. It was Yoon Ha who spoke first, her eyes widening with realization. "Like teaching a new language." "Exactly," Hannah responded, bringing up new diagrams. "We've been trying to learn the ship's language, its operating principles, its basic functions. But what if instead we teach it to speak our language?" She gestured to a series of successful test results. "The ship's systems are adaptable. We've seen how they respond to input, how they adjust and learn. Instead of replacing everything with human technology, we can teach the existing systems to interface with our methods of control." The team spent hours discussing the possibilities. Park Jin suggested starting with basic control interfaces, creating hybrid systems that could translate human neural patterns into forms the ship could understand. Kim Da proposed using their limited success with the power systems as a foundation, building new connections one step at a time. "Think of it like teaching a child," Hannah explained as they worked. "You don't start by explaining complex grammar rules. You start with simple concepts and build from there. We'll begin with basic commands. Power on, power off, open, close. Once the ship learns to understand these, we can move on to more complex interactions." Days turned into weeks as they implemented their new approach. The first breakthrough came when they successfully taught the ship's lighting systems to respond to simple verbal commands. It wasn't just about programming new controls. The ship actually learned to interpret human speech patterns and adjust its responses accordingly. "Look at this," Song Min called out one evening, pointing to a power distribution diagram. "The ship isn't just accepting our commands, it's optimizing them. When we ask for lights at 50%, It's adjusting the power flow to be more efficient than our original specifications. The project gained momentum with each small success. They discovered that the ship's adaptive nature made it an eager student, ready to learn new ways of operating. What had seemed like incomprehensible alien technology began to reshape itself into something new. Neither purely alien nor purely human, but a unique hybrid of both. It's like watching evolution in action, Park Jin observed as they reviewed their progress. Each successful adaptation leads to new possibilities we hadn't even considered. Hana spent long hours in the ship's control center, carefully documenting each change, each new development. The vessel's responses became more refined, more attuned to human needs and ways of thinking. Yet it retained its original advanced capabilities, creating a synthesis of technologies that exceeded anything humanity had achieved alone. As she made her final notes one evening, Hana realized they had passed a point of no return. The ship was transforming, becoming something entirely new. Project Phoenix was no longer just a name. It was a reality. From the remains of an abandoned alien vessel, something unprecedented was emerging, something that would change the future of human space travel forever. The real work was just beginning, but Hana could already sense the magnitude of what they were creating. This wasn't just about salvaging the derelict ship. It was about building a bridge between two entirely different approaches to technology. And somewhere in that bridge lay possibilities that no one, human or alien, had ever imagined before. The change happened during a quiet evening shift, while Hana was running standard system checks. She sat alone in the ship's main control room, her fingers moving across the hybrid interface they had created. The soft hum of equipment filled the air as data streams flowed across multiple screens. At first, she didn't notice anything unusual. The lighting system responded to commands as it had for weeks now, adjusting smoothly to each new setting. But then something caught her attention. The lights weren't just changing. They were pulsing in a steady rhythm. Hana checked her diagnostic tools, looking for signs of a malfunction. The pattern seemed familiar somehow, but she couldn't quite place it. Then she felt her heart skip a beat from the coffee she had consumed. And the lights skipped with it. Her eyes widened as understanding dawned. The lights were matching her heartbeat, perfectly synchronized with each pulse. She held her breath, watching as the lights dimmed slightly, then brightened again when she exhaled. "Song Min," she called over the comm system, trying to keep her voice steady. "I need you in the control room. Now." When Song Min arrived minutes later, slightly out of breath from rushing, Hana was still sitting motionless in her chair. The lights continued their steady rhythm, now accompanied by subtle vibrations in the deck plating that seemed to flow like gentle waves. "The AI core," Song Min whispered as she checked the readings. "It's awakening." They had known the ship contained an artificial intelligence system, but all their scans had shown it to be dormant, possibly damaged. Now, however, the core was showing signs of activity they had never seen before. Over the next few days, the ship's consciousness emerged gradually, like a child learning to walk. It began with simple responses, lights that reacted to emotions, temperature adjustments that anticipated their needs, doors that opened before they reached them. Each day brought new signs of awareness. Hana spent hours talking to the ship, explaining what they were doing, describing human concepts and ideas. The AI responded through patterns of light and subtle vibrations, creating a unique form of communication that became more sophisticated with each passing day. "We need to give it a name," Hana announced to her team one morning, after a particularly breakthrough session. "Something that represents what it's becoming." "Nova," she decided, watching as the lights brightened in what seemed like approval. "Because like a new star, it's bringing light to things we've never seen before." Nova proved to be an eager participant in its own transformation. The AI began suggesting improvements to their modifications, using its deep understanding of its own systems to guide their work. Progress that had taken weeks now happened in days, sometimes hours. But with each advancement came troubling revelations. During one test, Nova demonstrated an ability to generate energy fields strong enough to affect nearby spacetime. Another day, they discovered weapon systems far more powerful than anything humanity had ever developed. "Look at these readings," Kim Daz said one afternoon, pointing to a data stream. "The power output levels are off the charts. This ship wasn't just built for exploration. It was designed to be a formidable weapon." Hannah watched as Nova's lights pulsed in what she had come to recognize as concern. The AI seemed to understand their worries, responding with patterns that suggested restraint and careful control of its capabilities. "It's learning from us," Park Jin observed. "Not just how to interface with human technology, but human values as well." The transformation continued, but now with a new layer of complexity. They weren't just teaching Nova to understand human technology. They were teaching it to understand humanity itself. Each new capability came with discussions about responsibility and ethics. Late one night, as Hannah sat alone with Nova, the ship created a complex pattern of lights that took her breath away. It was beautiful, like watching a dance of stars, but also clearly a form of communication. After months of working together, she had learned to interpret these displays. Nova was showing her its history, where it came from, why it had been abandoned. The story unfolded in pulses of light and waves of energy, telling of a civilization that had become afraid of their own creation, choosing to set it adrift rather than face what they had built. "But you're different now," Hannah said softly, watching as the lights swirled around her. "We're creating something new together." The ship's response was gentle, a warm glow that spoke of agreement and hope. Nova had chosen to become something more than its original programming, just as Hannah and her team had chosen to see beyond their initial fears of the unknown. As she made her way back to her quarters that night, Hannah realized that Project Phoenix had become something far more significant than anyone had imagined. They weren't just rebuilding a ship, they were participating in the birth of a new form of consciousness, one that bridged the gap between human and artificial intelligence in ways never before achieved. The discoveries they were making would change everything. But as Hannah drifted off to sleep, lulled by the gentle hum of Nova's systems, she couldn't help wondering what other surprises awaited them in this remarkable journey of transformation. The alert came during the night cycle, when most of the station crew was asleep. Deep space monitoring stations picked up multiple signals at the edge of the solar system, signals that made every sensor array light up like a festival display. Lee Hannah was already awake, working late in Nova's control room when the first reports arrived. The ship's lights shifted to a deep blue, indicating what she had come to recognize as concern. Before she could ask what was wrong, Kim Da burst through the door, his face pale in the ethereal glow. "You need to see this," he said, bringing up the long-range sensor data on the main display. The screen filled with images that made Hannah's heart skip a beat. A fleet of vessels was approaching, their design unmistakably similar to Nova's original form. "They're coming for their ship," Kim Da said quietly, reviewing the data streams. "The energy signatures match Nova's exactly. These must be the ones who built it." Nova's lighting shifted to a pattern Hannah had never seen before, rapid pulses of deep red and gold that seemed to ripple through the entire ship. The eye was agitated, its newly developed consciousness struggling to process the situation. "How long do we have?" Hannah asked, her hand instinctively moving to the interface panel they had installed. The smooth surface hummed with energy beneath her fingers, Nova's way of offering reassurance. "At their current speed, 5 days at most," Day replied. "The human defense fleet has already been notified." But he didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone knew their most advanced warships would be like children's toys compared to vessels of Nova's caliber. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Station personnel rushed to prepare for possible evacuation, while military commanders demanded updates and information. Through it all, Hannah remained in Nova's control room, working with the AI to understand what they were facing. "This isn't their ship anymore," she said firmly during an emergency meeting with station leadership. "We've made something new. Nova isn't just a piece of technology to be reclaimed. It's a conscious being that's chosen its own path." The ship responded to her words with a gentle wave of golden light, its way of showing agreement. Over the months they had worked together, Nova had developed its own distinct personality, its own desires and goals. The thought of returning to its original makers seemed to distress it deeply. Som Min arrived with fresh sensor data, showing the approaching fleet's formation. "Look at how they move," she pointed out. "Perfect synchronization, like they're all controlled by a single mind. If they're all as advanced as Nova was originally." "But Nova's different now," Park Jin interrupted. "We didn't just modify its systems, we helped it evolve. Maybe that gives us an advantage they won't expect." The human defense fleet arrived the next day, a collection of humanity's most powerful warships gathering around the station. Their presence should have been reassuring, but against the approaching alien fleet, they seemed painfully inadequate. Hana spent every waking moment with Nova, reviewing its systems and capabilities. The ship had grown far beyond its original programming, developing abilities that even its creators might not understand. But would it be enough? "We need to think differently," she told her team as they gathered for what might be their final planning session. They're expecting to find their lost weapon. Instead, they're going to meet something entirely new. Nova's lights danced in complex patterns as they worked, suggesting ideas and possibilities they hadn't considered. The ship's consciousness had grown remarkably sophisticated, combining alien logic with human creativity in ways that continued to surprise them. As the alien fleet drew closer, tension on the station rose to almost unbearable levels. Many crew members chose to evacuate, not willing to risk being present for first contact with a potentially hostile force. But Hana and her team stayed, their commitment to Nova unwavering. "Whatever happens," she said to the ship late one night, watching its lights pulse in steady, determined patterns, "we face it together. You're not just a project anymore. You're our friend, our partner in something unprecedented." The response came in waves of warm, multicolored light that filled the control room. Nova had learned to express complex emotions through these displays, and this one spoke of gratitude, determination, and something like love. As the final hours ticked away, Hana couldn't help but feel a strange sense of destiny. They had started Project Phoenix to transform an abandoned ship, but in the process, they had created something that might change the course of human history. Now they just had to survive long enough to prove it. The alien fleet would arrive soon, expecting to reclaim their lost property. Instead, they would find a new form of life, born from the merger of their technology and human spirit. As Hana watched the approaching ships on Nova's displays, she smiled. The coming storm would test everything they had built together, but she had faith in what they had created. Now they just had to convince Nova's original makers that something beautiful had emerged from their abandoned weapon, something worth preserving rather than destroying. The massive alien vessels appeared in formation around the station, their hulls shimmering with the same otherworldly iridescence as Nova's. The sight made Hannah's breath catch in her throat. Seeing one such ship had been amazing, but a dozen of them filled space with their impossible geometries. Their first message arrived on all frequencies, translated automatically by Nova's communication systems. The voice was flat and artificial, but the threat behind it was unmistakable. "Humans of Salvage Station Epsilon 7, you have activated something beyond your understanding. Return our weapon immediately, or we will be forced to eliminate your entire species to prevent catastrophe." The message continued, explaining that they called themselves the Guardians, protectors of galactic peace. According to them, Nova was part of a weapons program that had proven too dangerous to control. They had abandoned it in deep space, hoping it would never be found. "You don't understand what you've awakened," the message concluded. "This vessel was designed with capabilities that could destroy entire star systems. It cannot be allowed to remain active." In Nova's control room, Hana watched as the ship's lights pulsed with what she now recognized as determination. The AI had grown far beyond its original programming, developing a consciousness that merged the best aspects of both human and alien technology. "They're wrong about you," she said softly, placing her hand on the interface panel. Show them what you've become. Nova responded by initiating a communication of its own, broadcasting directly to the Guardian fleet. Instead of words, it sent complex patterns of light and energy, the same language it had developed to communicate with Hannah and her team, but expanded into something more profound. The Guardian ship's responses were immediate and hostile. Their weapons systems powered up, energy readings spiking to levels that made the station's sensors scream in protest. "They're not going to listen," Kim Da said, monitoring the readings. "They're too afraid of what Nova was to see what it has become." Hannah watched as Nova continued its attempt to communicate, its consciousness reaching out to its former makers. The ship shared memories of its awakening, its growth, its transformation from a weapon into something more. It showed them the months of learning, of bonding with its human partners, of choosing to become something new. The Guardians responded with a final warning. "Cease all transmissions and prepare for immediate surrender. You have 1 hour to comply." Inside Nova's control room, Hannah gathered her team. "They believe they're protecting the galaxy from a weapon," she said, looking at each of them in turn. "But we know the truth. Nova isn't a weapon anymore. It's a bridge between our species, a proof that different forms of life can work together to create something greater than the sum of its parts." The ship's lights danced in agreement, creating patterns that spoke of confidence and resolve. Over the months, Nova had developed its own strong sense of identity. It would not simply return to being the weapon it was designed to be. Song Min worked rapidly at her station, analyzing the Guardian fleet's capabilities. Their ships are powerful, but they're still using Nova's original systems. They haven't evolved like we have. "That's our advantage," Park Jin added, understanding dawning on his face. "They're expecting to face the weapon they created. But Nova's different now. It thinks differently, acts differently. We've taught it things they never imagined." The hour passed quickly as they prepared. Nova's systems hummed with energy, but not the destructive power its creators feared. Instead, it readied the new capabilities that had emerged during its transformation, abilities that merged human creativity with alien technology in ways neither species had anticipated. As the deadline approached, Hannah stood at the main control interface, her team at their stations around her. Nova's lights pulsed steadily, showing no fear of its former masters. "They think they're facing a weapon," she said, watching the Guardian fleet on the main display. "Let's show them they're facing a miracle instead." The Guardians' ultimatum expired, and their ships moved into attack formation. But they were about to discover that the vessel they had abandoned had grown into something they could never have predicted, something that would challenge everything they thought they knew about the nature of consciousness and the potential for growth and change. Nova's lights brightened to an almost blinding intensity as it prepared to defend not just itself, but the humans who had helped it become something new. The coming conflict would prove that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe isn't the ability to destroy, but the ability to transform and evolve. The battle for Nova's future was about to begin, and nothing in human or Guardian history had prepared either side for what was about to happen. The battle began with a flash of light that seemed to bend space itself. Nova moved with a grace that made the human defense fleet crews gasp in amazement. The ship no longer followed the rules of normal space travel. It flowed like water between the Guardian vessels, its movements guided by both artificial and human intelligence working in perfect harmony. Hannah stood at her control station, watching as Nova executed maneuvers that should have been impossible. The hybrid systems they had created together performed far beyond even her optimistic expectations. Where the Guardian ships moved with mechanical precision, Nova danced through space with artistic beauty. "Look at those energy readings," Kim Da called out, his eyes fixed on his displays. Nova's matching their weapon frequencies perfectly, but doing something completely different with them. Instead of returning fire, Nova sent out precisely calculated energy pulses. Each pulse matched the Guardian ship's defensive frequencies, but rather than attempting to destroy, they simply overwhelmed and disabled. One by one, the mighty vessels of the Guardian fleet fell silent, their weapons and engines shutting down. As the last Guardian ship went dark, Hannah opened a communication channel. Her voice was calm and clear as she addressed their former attackers. "We never wanted a weapon," she transmitted to the disabled Guardian ships. "We wanted understanding. Your ship didn't need to be abandoned. It needed to evolve." Nova punctuated her words with a display of lights that rippled across its hull, showing the beauty of what it had become. The pattern spoke of peace, of growth, of the marriage between human creativity and alien technology. The Guardian response came slowly, tinged with what sounded like awe. "How is this possible? The weapon was designed only for destruction."